Today, what we're going to do is we're going to start working with Photoshop, and we're also going to create a caricature. So here is your example of what that would look like. So a caricature is taking a picture of somebody and then exaggerating their features to make them a little more cartoony, that sort of thing. So for this character example, we're going to do a picture of Tom Cruise. So first thing I'm going to do is open up Photoshop. So I got that opened up already. Boop. It's open, so I'm going to go up to the top where it says File. I'm going to open up the picture that I have. I already have a picture of Tom Cruise here on my desktop, so I'll just click on that. So once I click on it, it opens it up into a Photoshop file. So for this, we're going to use a few different tools here in Photoshop to create our caricature. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top where it says Filter. And under Filter, you're going to find an option that says Liquify. What Liquify will let you do is distort the picture and change it in different ways. So you've got some different options here. The first thing I'm going to use is, I'll use the Forward Warp tool. And let me adjust my size here. Well, not that big. Okay, so you don't want to make it too small. So one of his things is got kind of a big square jaw. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to exaggerate the size of his jaw. And, he's got a big crazy smile. So I might also exaggerate a little bit of that. So you just click on the part you want to move. Click and then move it with your mouse. And maybe I'll give him a bigger forehead. We'll exaggerate the size of his forehead a little bit. I may pull his chin down a little bit. Alright, we've also got some of these other tools over here. So when I hover over them, you can see what they do. So we've got the bloat tool. I'm going to go ahead and use that. So the bloat tool just makes things bigger when you click on them. So one of the things with Tom Cruise is his front tooth is a little more in the center than, off to the side as most people are. So we're going to exaggerate that a little bit. Maybe not that much. So that's one of his features that kind of stands out a little bit. And maybe I'll shrink his eyes a little bit just because I can. Let's see. I push in his neck and his shoulders so make his head look bigger, because the other thing with caricatures is everybody always has big heads. Maybe I might exaggerate the size of his ears too a little bit, so I'll use that bloat tool to make it a little bit bigger. Alright, so you want your person to look like your person, so you don't want to just warp things all nonsensically. You want to exaggerate certain features of theirs that are prominent, and things that they're maybe known for. So like if I was doing a picture of let's say Barack Obama, one of his things is he's got big ears, so we might exaggerate the size of his ears and that sort of thing. So let's look at prominent features on your character, and then you want to exaggerate those features. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So you can see this is what he looked like before. This is what he looks like with my exaggeration. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this from color to black and white. So I'm going to go Image, Adjustments, and I'm going to choose black and white. Okay, we'll call that good. Now I'm going to use some other filters. So I'm going to go back up to Filter, and I'm going to select my filter gallery. And in the filter gallery, under Artistic, I'm going to use this one called Poster Edges. And I'm going to scroll all these over. as far as they go. So my edge thickness to 10, my edge intensity to 10, my posterization to 6. I'll click OK. Alright, so this will give me more of kind of an outline, illustrative type look. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to image, and I'm going to go to adjustments, and I'm going to use exposure. And under exposure, I'm going to expose the picture to take out all the gray, so it's just black and white. Alright, so with that, this makes it look a little more illustrative too, but some of my lines have kind of disappeared a little bit. So what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to take my paintbrush tool, and with your paintbrush tool you can adjust the size. I don't want the size to be any thicker than what these lines already are, so the size that I'm at right now is pretty good. You got your hardness. If you have your hardness depending on what you have it set to, it will either give you a hard line. So right now my hardness is set at 0, so this is kind of a blurry line. So I'm going to switch that from 0 to 100%. So I'm going to take off that line because I don't want to see it. Alright, so I'll set this to 100%, so then I've got a harder line, and I'm just going to outline a few of these parts where there's like a break in the line, because I want my picture to be connected together. I don't want any unnecessary gaps. Might shrink the size down just a little bit, maybe to we'll say 4. Okay, so let me see the line on this tooth here, his mouth, and let's close in this mouth here. Show us other teeth. I'll fix this shoulder here. Fix this shoulder here. I'll close in the bottom of his nose. Okay, so I also have maybe a few lines that I don't really want to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my paintbrush color from black to white. So I'll go down here where the color is, double click, and I'm going to choose white. And under his nose here, I've got this part that looks kind of like a weird mustache thing. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'll adjust the size. I keep my hardness at 100%, so then I get a nice clean line. Take out a few of these dots and things that look kind of odd. Just clean up the face a little bit so that it's a little smoother, a little more natural looking. I'll take out these parts here on his neck. I'll clean that up a little bit. Clean that up a little bit. And I think I'll go ahead and get rid of these things in the background because I don't think they're necessary for the picture. Let me adjust the size, make it a little bigger so then I can cover more area a lot faster. Like so. Okay, I'll call that good for now. This for the sake of time, so I don't want to take all day doing this. Okay, so what I'm gonna do next, well, let me fix one more thing. So I'm gonna go back to my paintbrush. I'll shrink my size down again, and take black. I'm gonna close in his hairline, the bottom of his head a little bit. I want my lines closed in, and you'll see why here in a second when I go and do this next step. I'll go ahead and fix that line under his nose. I fix up his mouth just a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this So I hit save. Actually, what I should do is save as. Let's go save as. You want to make sure you save it as a JPEG. Okay, so you know, if it's like a PDF or a PNG or whatever, I don't know. Always make sure it's a JPEG for this. So save it as a JPEG. So we got Tom Cruise JPEG. I'm just going to save it to my desktop so I can find it real quick. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Illustrator. And from Illustrator, I'm going to go ahead and open that picture that I saved, that JPEG of Tom here. So let me find it here. There we go. Okay, so in Illustrator, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this picture, and then when I select that picture, I can see I've got these different options here. And I'm going to trace the image. So click trace the image. So it cleans it up a little bit, makes it a little bit nicer. So you've got some different options. You can, if you click on the little arrow next to it, it gives you some different options. You do like a silhouette or whatever. So it looks pretty good. If you don't see your trace image up there, it's probably you need to switch your workspace from essentials to automation. So make sure it's on automation so that you can find that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. It's a lot cleaner, it's a lot smoother, a lot nicer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this. So let's hit Control C. So select the picture, hit Control C, and then I'm going to go back into Photoshop. I'm going to hit Control V. It'll let me. Okay, so we'll say OK. Alright, so I'll put this picture on top. Let me go ahead and hide the one underneath. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start coloring in my picture. So you should have a paint bucket. So your paint bucket's over here. So I'm going to take my paint bucket and I'm going to start dumping color in different parts of my picture. So the way I'll start with his face. I'm going to pick kind of something that looks like more of a skin color. That looks pretty good. I'll just dump that in. Different parts of his face, so I color him in real quick. Let's color in his hair, so I'm going to take some brown. Since his hair is brown, I'll just fill that in, dump in paint in these different, these different spots. Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and call that good for his hair for now. So if you notice, this background looks like a checkerboard. It's because there's nothing there. It's empty. So if you have a picture and there's nothing behind it, it's just going to look like a checkerboard. So I'll leave that there. And I'm going to use my crop tool. I'm going to crop this just a little bit. I'll crop this down just a little bit. Hit enter. Okay, now I'll just color the background a random color, doesn't matter. Just to fill it in. Use my paint bucket again. Fill that in. Fill that in. And let's go ahead and color his outfit. Fill that in. Fill that in. Yeah, I'll change the color for his shirt. Okay, so now he's pretty well colored in. So I don't want to just leave him like that. I want to give his face some form and some shape to it. So we're going to do this a couple ways. First what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. So down here at the bottom, When I hover over this area, it says create new layer, so I'm going to create a new layer. And in this new layer, I'm going to do some shading in this layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this area where it says normal. I'm going to switch this to multiply so that I can see through it. Now I'm going to take my paintbrush, and maybe I'll make the size a little bit bigger. And for this, I'm going to turn my hardness down to 0 because I want this to be a softer line. I don't want it to be hard and real clean. I want it to be a little more blurry. So, alright, so if I hold my Alt key, it'll switch my paintbrush to a little eyedropper. So I'm going to select that color that I use to color them in. So if you hit your Alt key and then click on it, it'll choose that color. So I'm going to use that color and overlay it so you can see it's a little bit darker, but it's the same color. It's just you've got a couple layers of it, so then it makes the color look a little bit darker. So that'll help to create a little bit of shadow. So I'm going to do some shading in a few areas, around his nose, maybe under his eyes, probably under his nose, under his mouth, under his chin. Some areas where the shadow would naturally be. Maybe do a little bit of shading in his ears, maybe underneath his hairline, because you probably find some shadow under there. Right here in this little dimples on his cheeks, under these areas. Alright, so you can see that's already started to give his face a little more shape so it doesn't look so flat. I'll throw some shadow in his hair, so I'm going to hit my Alt key and turn that to an eyedropper, hit select, and I'll add a little bit of shadow, a few little spots in his hair, just to add some contrast. Maybe I'll throw some shadow under his collar, so I'll hit my Alt key, choose that color, add some shadow under his collar, hit my Alt key, select that, and I add some shadow around his shoulders. Okay, so I'll go ahead and call that good for the shading. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to filter, and I'm going to scroll down and find blur, and under blur I'm going to use what's called the Gaussian blur. So go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and with this you can adjust how blurry you want to make something. So this is pretty much without a blur. I'll just add a little bit more just to stretch out the shadows a little bit and have them kind of fade out a little bit more. Okay, that looks good. You don't want to blur it too much, because if you blur it too much, it's just going to disappear like that, and we want to see it. So, Gesundheit. Don't want to blur it too much. Okay, so that looks good. I'll go ahead and click OK. Okay, so the shadows give his face a little more form, but I also want to give him some highlights to round it out even more. So I'm going to create another layer. In this new layer, I'm going to use my paintbrush, and I'm going to use white. And adjust the size, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, make sure your hardness is set to 0. And I'm going to add a few highlights in some areas. Maybe here on the tip of his nose, I get a couple spots across his forehead. Maybe here on his cheeks, on his chin, maybe down here on his neck. I don't know. I'll make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so right now you might be thinking, oh, that looks kind of dumb. So, before you freak out too much, I'll pull this across his nose a little bit more. We're going to do the same thing we did with our shadow. So, go back up to filter. I'm going to go blur. I'm going to use my Gaussian blur, and I'm going to blur this out a little bit more. Okay, so you can see that looks a little nicer, not so intense, and it also rounds out the shape of his face. And I'll go ahead and click OK. Okay, so there's a real quick overview of how you can create a caricature that way. So using Photoshop and Illustrator, mostly Photoshop. And anyway, if you weren't able to get Photoshop on your computer, just go ahead and write down the steps that we took to create our caricature. And you don't have to do Tom Cruise. You can do anybody you want. So you choose who you want to do for your caricature, and look at their features and what you can exaggerate in order to make them look like that person. And that's what we'll do for this particular project. Okay? All right.